Welcome to the Filmanalysis. Today with the top 10 best films of 2023. This year too we saw brilliant, outstanding, wonderful and beautiful films. Of course there were average films and a lot of rubbish, but some films stand out. Before we get to that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, for your loyalty, for sharing the videos on social media. I would also like to thank you for your financial support. Now, let's get to it. Tenth place, Killers of the Flower Moon by Martin Scorsese. There is a particularly great scene in this lengthy film. We see Robert De Niro standing as he bends over a woman from the indigenous tribe, and he says to her, "We have brought so much suffering upon you." And he holds his hand on her shoulders and is shown speaking to her from above. The camera perspective is the decisive factor illustrating the gap between what is said and what is meant. Scorsese constantly plays with the divergence of image and words in this film. And here he narrows it down to a marvelous point. There is no better way to capture how paternalistic and often colonialist even the post-colonial gesture can be. Every embrace turns out to be a stranglehold. Scorsese reinvents himself once again with this film. In his classics, such as Mean Streets or Taxi Driver, he has repeatedly shown us characters who are unlikable, annoying and repulsive. Now, however, Scorsese takes a subtle approach when Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio quietly and calmly do heinous things. The film shows the indigenous people as the victims of the white man disguising himself as a protector. And when Martin Scorsese himself appears at the very end, he not only bows to the audience, but also deconstructs American history. Ninth position, The Young Lovers by Karine Tardieu. We experience great acting cinema here, namely Fanny Ardant and Melville Poupeau. She plays a 70-year-old woman who meets a younger doctor. This man is 25 years younger. They met once before, many years ago, but now they experience what you might call unconditional love. These two are attracted to each other, they are not able to let go of each other, and this will turn their lives completely upside down. Karine Tardieu bears the brunt of other people's reproaches, but she is able to appease them again and again. Love is terrible, unfair and unpredictable. The doctor's wife suffers the most, and yet it is not a film that condemns in any way, that suggests one right way, but allows the power of love and the brutality of love to unfold as it is. Not the question what will be in a few years is asked here in the end, but it is about the here and now, which is to be enjoyed, because we are not only dealing with a big age difference, but also with a woman who is very ill and who already has the end quite clearly in sight. Should we, in this case, embark on something new again? But if it turns out to be a couple of wonderful hours, like the 2 hours we spent at the cinema, it was worth it. Despite all the emotional extremes we are exposed to, we can fully understand all the characters in the film at the end. Eighth place, John Wick Chapter 4 by Chad Stahelski. A magical work of light. Here we see human movement cutting through this cathedral of light. John Wick creates a world of its own. a world that has its own rules, its own conventions, and the characters also have their own way of walking through this world. The scenario seems quite detached from our world. However, the play with light connects the world with ours. A highly modern film, as we also move through the glow of neon signs. We drown in the starry sea of disco balls. The neon light shines lonely on us. We check into the hotel just like John Wick, and we walk through corridors that light up and go dark again. This film captures our urban world magnificently, but adds a certain abstraction so that a slight alienation takes place, which we then carry back into reality. And Keanu Reeves as John Wick brings this world closer to us. He presents it to us as a projection screen. He is an everyman. While he certainly has a few special skills and talents, he's just like us. And that's why we are enchanted by this film, despite all its harshness and brutality. In a way, all this light that this film radiates warms us. Seventh place, Goldhammer by André Krummel and Pablo Ben-Jakov. What is the relationship between fiction and reality in a documentary film? Goldhammer shows us. That is very difficult to answer, because a documentary film does not simply depict reality, nor is it reality. Only reality is reality. A documentary film selects, adopts certain perspectives and thus alienates reality or fictionalizes it. This film takes it all much further because it features a protagonist for whom fiction and reality seem to collapse into one. There is Max Goldhammer, who initially makes an extraordinary career. He stems from a working class family from a rural German region and then sets off into the world to become an actor and is initially successful. He captured hearts, but then something changes. He converts to Judaism, he starts working as a gay escort, then joins the right-wing party AfD and takes part in coronavirus demonstrations. At the same time, it is a lonely character longing for love and attention, perfectly aware of the media circus, always looking at what to do next. We hear Pablo Ben-Jakov say off-screen that perhaps this Max Goldhammer hasn't changed at all over the years, but that everything around him has changed and is much more politically charged. We have the shift to the right and all that. And suddenly this protagonist, someone who has an incredible amount to say to us today, has been transformed by this changed environment. Or rather, it's a postmodern, colorful, dazzling figure telling us a lot about what we are experiencing politically throughout the world. It is a spectacular documentary film due to its clearly documentary scenes, but there are also stage scenes in which Max explains in a tutorial character what an escort is supposed to do. And then there are the scenes where everything falls into place. For example, Max begins to talk about his breakup with his boyfriend and he describes his feelings with great emotion. And suddenly André Krummel and Pablo Ben-Jakov start laughing behind the camera. Now Max laughs too and immediately then starts to speak very emotionally and seriously into the camera again. It is no longer possible to separate appearance from reality here. But these categories are also irrelevant, considering that reality is still being shaped by whomever. Trump was a reality star who later ended up being president, or rather playing president. Who can say for sure? But for those who suffered from it, it wasn't a game. Goldhammer accompanies us in the coming years if we want to understand fictionalized reality. Sixth place, The Teacher's Lounge by Ilka Schatak. A school in Berlin, thefts are on the rise, the teaching staff are alarmed, the school management wants to crack down and relies on denunciation. Individual pupils are also being put under pressure. They are asked to testify against their classmates. One young teacher is not happy about all this, but time and again she must make deals with the staff, and she starts to suspect someone herself, not a pupil, and suddenly she begins collecting evidence. She secretly lets a webcam run. Secretary soon becomes the prime suspect, and her son, a pupil at the school, begins an extraordinary strike to protect his mother and demonstrate against it. Schatak's precise film shows where positivist ideology leads. When everything must be provable and predictable, we end up in a world dominated by algorithms and surveillance. In consequence, trust ceases to exist. The film is particularly strong because it doesn't resolve the interpersonal problems at the end, as they can't be solved like a Rubik's Cube. Instead, the film emphasizes both the weakness and the sovereignty of the subject. The Teacher's Lounge is the parable needed right now. Fifth place, The Banshees of Inisherin by Martin McDonagh. An extraordinary friendship film and an outstanding artist drama. One friend is a bit simple-minded and he's content to sit in the pub and go about his day, doing his little jobs, but not thinking much about the world. The other friend lives like this too, but he wants to create a great work, and he believes he can only do this if he separates himself from his friend, if he withdraws and starts composing. Only then can he succeed in creating something lasting. This film is not just about how you can end a friendship, it's about how you should lead your life meaningfully. We have a new seriousness, you could say, in cinema, that you don't just deal with such questions ironically, that you don't just concentrate on having a bit of fun, but that you try to re-establish an existentialism in cinema that existed decades ago. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson play this existentialist drama, which is tragicomic in nature, wonderfully. The film expresses an explicit critique of the state in images reminiscent of Francisco de Zubaran, particularly in the interiors, and then shows the blackness in the edges of the images. It displays the abyss of the soul, also the abyss of one's own existence. And this is perhaps also the blackness that opens when you leave socializing altogether. This tragic comedy will certainly remain. It is characterized by great seriousness and a very classical style. Fourth place, Sick of Myself by Christopher Borkley. This is the funniest film of the year. It centers on a couple of artists. He is already relatively successful, but she's not. And she thinks to herself, how could she also manage to be successful? She has heard of a drug that has long since been taken off the market because it causes severe rashes and open sores all over one's body and face. She begins to take this medication day after day, and so her career takes off. She exhibits this deformed body, her face which is bruised. Newspaper interviews and TV appearances follow suit, in which she also talks about how difficult her relationship with her father is. And then a contract with a modeling agency beckons. This film about the cult of victimhood in the attention economy is bitterly angry and incredibly funny. And here the media's logic of self-exposure is taken to the extreme. If you want to be in the media today, you don't have to have something to say or achieve great things. Instead, it's enough to talk about your mental health problems, about difficult childhoods, and exploit them in interviews. No book, no album release, no podcast promo without the actors peddling their illnesses. See Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Joseph Beuys demanded, "Show your wound." In the film, it is taken a little further. First, inflict a wound, and then you have something to talk about. I'm relieved this nasty film was produced. That takes courage. And by the way, every cultural journalist should watch this film. Third place, How to Have Sex by Molly Manning Walker. We see three 16-year-old girls, Tara, M and Sky, having just graduated. While the future lies ahead of them, it's uncertain. One of them will probably go to college. For the others, however, employment may already be waiting, and so they decide to enjoy their time. They are traveling to Crete to have a really good time. One of them, Tara, is supposed to lose her virginity so that she is ready for an adult life. She's played by Mia McKenna-Bruce, delivering an incredibly brilliant performance. We must remember this name. And everywhere now, in this supposed holiday paradise, the imperative fun is roaring and booming. But what does that mean? What does it really mean to enjoy life? The offer of this spring break tourism is to play drinking games under a booming noise and a horny audience, or maybe even blowjobs on an open stage. The film features the greatest uptightness and at the same time infinite sadness. It's not like in Spring Breakers, which works with exaggeration and stylization. Instead, the director sticks to the subject matter in a documentary style. Bad things happen to Tara, and it's a highly ambivalent situation. She has sex with some guy on the beach who has just been waiting for her to say yes. But he doesn't want to hear the nuances, because it's also a society lacking nuances, only containing booming basses. And here the director shows us that this legalization, yes is yes, no is no, falls short. It's much more complex than that. Molly Manning Walker shows us in an unfree society, it is not possible to decide on one's own free will. And the tragedy is that it's the two closest friends who are so caught up in consumerist ideology that they can't see what happens to Tara once and then again. The film says we need a sexual revolution. All the practices and varieties are known, and you can look it up in the internet. But how we treat each other is not known. And then it's the guy's mate who seems to sense something but can't say it outright. It's the narrative, the acting, and the camera's gaze opening the brutality we often don't see when we look at the kind of spring break we have seen 100 times in TV reports. When you are young, that's what you do. You must enjoy life. Don't be a spoilsport. This film shows us these are the most brutal sentences ever. Second place, A Fire by Christian Petzold. Ein Jüngling liebt ein Mädchen, das hat einen anderen erwählt, der andere liebt eine andere und hat sich mit dieser vermählt. Heinrich Heine. A young man loves a girl, she chooses another, the other loves another and marries her. Yes, an old story that Christian Petzold tells here, and yet he tells it in a completely new way. Two friends want to spend the summer working in a holiday home on the Baltic Sea. Surprisingly, a young woman has also stayed there and another man appears. One of them throws himself into life, the other doesn't quite know how. It is above all the artist who is desperately writing his novel and believes he must harden himself against reality to be able to describe it better. And it is certainly important to take distance to enable reflection. But how far do you have to go? At what price and at whose expense? And is it even possible to spend carefree days on the beach in the face of global catastrophes? Petzold has made a deeply touching, ravishingly beautiful love film that is also a highly philosophical artist drama addressing us directly as viewers, to the extent that we reflect on the ethics of the viewer. Where do we distance ourselves too much? Where do we need to get more involved? In the cinema and out there? This film will take its place in film history. Bravo! First place, Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. We live in times in which everything can escalate at any time. The nuclear threat is real, even if many close their eyes to it or neglectfully dismiss it. We are experiencing apocalypse blindness. Luckily, this film exists. With Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan has undoubtedly created the most important film of our time. And where in mainstream cinema, and Oppenheimer belongs to this mainstream cinema, has such a clear and intelligent critique of the state been made. Today, when people everywhere who live in a state are once again being equated with it and with those who govern it, a film is needed that exposes this nationalist ideology. And this is done here and clearly articulated by Einstein and Bohr. Nolan uses Oppenheimer to illustrate the state as the coldest of all monsters. But beyond its political explosiveness, Oppenheimer proves to be an aesthetic feast. Close-ups of faces are its main attraction. While the film covers quite some technical aspects, Nolan decides to put the faces in the foreground, because only in the cinema can we see faces this close, this big. And today we see how wonderful filming can be with featherlight drones and smartphone cameras, but this often results in images of pleasing symmetry and apparent intimacy. Sometimes you move in close, then move far away again, fly in, fly away. Nolan shot in analog with huge lead-heavy equipment. This is sometimes dismissed as the quirk of an old-fashioned cineast. That's completely wrong. It would be like saying about Michelangelo, it's just stupid that he carved his David, which is over 5 meters tall, out of a single block of marble. It would have been much easier with polystyrene. We also find Michelangelo's massiveness in Christopher Nolan's images. Today, anyone can produce reasonably pretty pictures or even have them generated, but producing images that carry weight remains the great task of artists, so that we don't watch but see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.